The Hidden World of Kafka. A man out of place. Franz Kafka is undoubtedly one of the most enigmatic figures in modern literature. His life and works continue to captivate readers and thinkers alike, even though he was largely unknown in his own time. In fact, his works were published posthumously, and much of his personal life was overshadowed by a complicated family dynamic. Kafka had a tumultuous relationship with his father, Hermann Kafka, who was a dominant and overbearing figure. It tells the story of Gregor Samsa, a man who wakes up one morning to find himself transformed into a giant insect. His identity is entirely tied to his ability to provide for them, and once that is gone, he is discarded, ignored, and ultimately rejected. Kafka's message isn't just about the alienation of an individual, but also about the dehumanization that occurs in modern society. In a world where success is often defined by productivity and output, the value of a person is frequently reduced to what they can contribute. In the trial, Kafka's protagonist, Joseph K., is trapped in an impenetrable legal system that offers no clarity or justice. Similarly, in The Castle, the protagonist is caught in an endless bureaucratic maze, constantly struggling to reach the mysterious authorities who govern his life. Kafka's characters are often caught in systems that strip away their humanity, forcing them to conform to arbitrary rules and regulations that provide no real sense of purpose or satisfaction. Instead, it is an invitation to explore the deeper, often uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world around us. He doesn't just examine the external forces that shape individuals, but also their internal worlds. How people wrestle with their sense of self in an indifferent, often hostile environment. The journey of Kafka's characters is not just one of external alienation, but also internal disintegration. In the trial, Joseph K. is trapped in an impenetrable legal system that does not acknowledge his humanity nor his rights. Similarly, in The Castle, the protagonist is caught in an endless bureaucratic maze, constantly struggling to reach the mysterious authorities who govern his life. Both of these works underscore the dehumanizing effects of impersonal systems that operate without concern for individual needs or emotions. Kafka warns us about the dangers of a world in which systems, not people, hold power, and where individuals are mere cogs in a machine, stripped of their individuality and agency. This breakdown of the self is most painfully illustrated in the Metamorphosis, where Gregor's transformation into a giant insect serves as a physical manifestation of his inner turmoil. The loss of identity that his characters experience is not merely about losing one's place in society. It is a profound spiritual and psychological crisis. For Gregor, his transformation represents the collapse of his self-identity. He ceases to be the man who was once a reliable son and worker. Instead, he becomes a creature, a thing that is no longer seen as human by his family. Kafka forces us to question how much of our identity is tied to the roles we play, and how easily we can lose ourselves when those roles are taken away. The fear of losing one's identity is central to the human experience, and Kafka's exploration of this theme remains as relevant today as it was in his time. Kafka's genius lies in how he uses this transformation to demonstrate the fragility of identity in a world where individuals are valued only for their ability to produce and fulfill roles. Kafka does not promise easy answers, but his work is an invitation to step into the unknown, to confront the parts of ourselves that are difficult to face, and to embrace the uncertainty of life. In Kafka's world, people are often reduced to mere functions within a system, whether it is the bureaucracy, the trial, or the societal roles that Gregor is forced to fulfill. His worth is measured by his ability to work and provide for his family, and once this function is rendered impossible, he is discarded. Kafka presents a haunting picture of a world that strips individuals of their humanity, reducing them to their utility. In doing so, he invites us to reflect on how modern life often reduces us to our roles: worker, provider, consumer, and robs us of the opportunity to explore or express who we truly are. In the next part of this script, we will delve deeper into Kafka's call to reconnect with our true selves and the importance of self-worth beyond external validation. In the Metamorphosis, Gregor's transformation into an insect serves as a metaphor for the dehumanization that comes with losing touch with one's authentic self. As the pressures of family, work, and society slowly strip away his sense of self, Kafka's works highlight the dangers of this mindset, urging us to question how we define our worth. Are we truly valuable as human beings, or are we merely tools for others' expectations? Kafka invites us to reflect on these questions, challenging us to rethink our relationship with our work, our family, and most importantly, ourselves. In a world where work becomes central to one's identity, Kafka raises an uncomfortable question. What happens when a person can no longer work? Is their worth nullified, reduced to nothing more than a shell of what they once were? This is a question many face today. They are also a call to action, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there is a need to reclaim our humanity. His works challenge us to resist the dehumanizing forces of modern life and to seek a deeper, more authentic existence. In the Metamorphosis, Gregor's transformation into an insect is a metaphor for the way in which people can become alienated from themselves and from others, losing sight of their true identity in the process. Kafka's work asks us to consider the role of alienation in our own lives, to reflect on how easily we can be consumed by the demands of work, family, and society at the expense of our own personal well-being. In the Metamorphosis, Gregor's eventual death is not just the end of his life. It's a symbolic act that asks the reader to reflect on the consequences of losing touch with who we are. Kafka does not offer a comforting solution to the struggles he depicts, but rather, he compels us to confront them. In today's world, especially under capitalism, a person's worth is often measured by their job title, salary, or how much they can contribute. If you can't earn or contribute, it's like your value goes down. People stop seeing you the same way. Kafka shows us how dangerous this mindset can be. He reminds us that basing your entire self-worth on your work is not only unhealthy, it's inhuman. Kafka's genius lies in showing how, even in a scenario as fantastical as a man turning into an insect, the story is still grounded in deeply relatable experiences. It reflects the alienation that individuals feel when they can no longer fulfill their societal roles. Gregor's tragedy, SNT, just that he has become a bug at S, that he has become invisible, worthless in the eyes of those he loved, because he is no longer able to meet their expectations. At first glance, the plot seems ridiculous, even comical. Yet, beneath the surface, it presents an excruciatingly poignant exploration of the human condition. Gregor's initial response upon realizing his transformation is not panic or despair, but a question of how he will make it to work. This reaction, Kafka's signature absurdity, underscores a powerful critique of the way modern society has conditioned us to equate our value with our work. Gregor's transformation, both physical and psychological, serves as an allegory for the way people often lose themselves in their roles and societal expectations. His father's harsh, authoritarian nature affected Kafka's self-esteem and sense of identity. Kafka's struggles with his father and the expectations placed on him by his family were themes that would find their way into his works, most notably in The Trial and the Metamorphosis. The father-son dynamic represented a larger societal conflict, one of authority, control, and the suffocating pressure of familial and social expectations. Born in Prague in 1883, Kafka's existence was marked by a sense of alienation. At its core, his writing grapples with the struggles of finding meaning, being understood, and maintaining connections in a world that feels cold, indifferent, and often oppressive. His most famous works, such as The Trial, The Castle, and The Metamorphosis, offer not just an escape into the strange and the fantastic, but also a mirror that reflects the darker aspects of human existence, the alienation that many of us feel in our day-to-day lives. He worked as a clerk in a bureaucratic institution during the day, while nurturing a secret passion for writing in the quiet solitude of his evenings. Kafka's reality, much like the worlds he created, was one of disconnection and isolation. While outwardly, he led an ordinary life. Inwardly, he was constantly engaged in a battle to make sense of a world that seemed indifferent to his existence. Kafka's life was not marked by grand success, fame, or recognition during his lifetime. Kafka's work is often considered surreal, even bizarre, but its themes resonate on a deeply human level. The Metamorphosis is often hailed as his most heartbreaking and insightful work. Gregor's family, who depend on him financially, soon sees him as a burden once he is no longer able to work. But the tragedy of Gregor's transformation runs deeper. This, in many ways, is the modern predicament. Kafka's writing offers a profound critique of the societal systems that prioritize productivity and external validation over personal fulfillment and authenticity. But Kafka's works are not merely bleak reflections of the human condition. Kafka's philosophy encourages a form of self-examination that demands we look beyond the surface and question our assumptions about identity, value, and connection. Kafka's philosophy is not a simple prescription for happiness or Kafka's exploration of identity extends beyond the surface level, probing deeply into the psychological and emotional realms of his characters. Gregor's Metamorphosis, though seemingly absurd, is rooted in the stark realities of modern life. Kafka's critique of modernity goes beyond the personal. It also tackles the structures of power that govern our lives. Kafka's works also highlight the deep existential anxiety that results from such alienation. Rediscovering our worth in a world of expectations in the first part, we explored how Kafka uses the Metamorphosis to reveal the dangers of measuring our worth by our roles and productivity. The story of Gregor Samsa, whose tragic transformation into an insect mirrors his alienation from his own humanity, serves as a profound critique of modernity's obsession with work, output, and societal expectations. However, Kafka's works, ask us more than just to recognize the problem. They challenge us to reflect on how we can reclaim our sense of self in a world that consistently tries to define us by what we do, what we produce, and how we conform. Gregor's inner thoughts reveal the extent to which he has internalized his role as a provider. Even in his transformed state, his thoughts are consumed with anxiety over work. This presents a powerful insight. What happens when our sense of self-worth becomes so entangled with our external roles that we lose sight of who we are outside of them? Kafka suggests that it is not just society's expectation of us that defines our value, but our own willingness to define ourselves according to those expectations. Modern life, particularly under the pressures of capitalism, has created a world in which individuals are often seen as resources to be utilized. Kafka does not suggest that we should avoid contributing to society or fulfilling our responsibilities. Instead, he invites us to ask the crucial question: what happens when we tie our entire identity to what we do, rather than to who we are? In Gregor's case, his identity was entirely absorbed by his role as a provider, and when he could no longer fulfill that role, he became nothing more than an insect to be discarded. Kafka's critique is as relevant today as it was in his time, urging us to question how we define ourselves, and how we can begin the work of reclaiming our humanity in a world that constantly measures us by our productivity. In the next section, we will explore how to resist the forces that try to dehumanize us and reconnect with the deeper truths of who we are. Kafka invites us to question our own relationship with work and productivity. How often do we define ourselves by our jobs or external accomplishments? How many of us, like Gregor, feel as though our value diminishes when we cannot live up to the expectations of others? People are valued based on their economic output, their ability to consume and produce, rather than on their inherent worth as human beings. This creates a culture in which rest, introspection, and individuality are often undervalued. The struggle for meaning is a central theme in Kafka's philosophy. Kafka's characters, despite their tragic endings, embody a profound and difficult resilience. They continue to search for meaning, even in the face of overwhelming odds. This is the strength that Kafka asks us to adopt, to embrace the unknown, to live authentically, and to create meaning in a world that often offers none. His characters are often trapped in systems that seem to offer no purpose, no direction, and no sense of fulfillment. Yet, even in the midst of this existential crisis, there is a persistent search for meaning. The Metamorphosis offers no easy answers, no redemption for Gregor, but it does invite us to reflect on the deeper question of what makes life meaningful when everything else feels absurd. Kafka calls us to resist this dehumanizing cycle and reclaim what makes us human. Kafka's characters often fall victim to this trap, believing that their worth lies in their function in the world. And when they can no longer perform that function, they become invisible. Kafka's critique is timeless, offering a message that resonates deeply in today's fast-paced, hyper-connected world. And this loss of humanity is the very thing Kafka is warning us about. When we measure our worth solely by our ability to produce, we lose touch with the fundamental truths of our being, that we are human, not because of what we do, but because of who we are. Kafka's works teach us that self-worth should be grounded in our intrinsic qualities, our values, our relationships, and our capacity for love and compassion. It is a call to redefine the ways in which we measure our own lives. In a society that often encourages us to focus on material success and measurable achievements, Kafka offers a more humanistic alternative: to measure our worth not by what we accomplish, but by who we are at our core. Kafka challenges us to ask, can we be more than just our job titles, our salaries, and our productivity? Can we reclaim our sense of self-worth outside of external validation? In a society that increasingly values individuals for their external achievements, be it financial success, social influence, or career milestones, Kafka's work urges us to reflect on a fundamental question. What happens when the roles we play are no longer valid, when we can no longer fulfill the expectations of others, or when life itself forces a change we cannot control? It is in the face of this question that Kafka's works hold their deepest lessons. He asks us to reconsider what happens to our identity when productivity becomes the central measure of our existence. In Gregor's case, he is not only physically transformed, but psychologically and socially isolated the moment he can no longer work. His transformation reflects the very real danger of losing ourselves in the roles we are expected to play. For many of us, identity becomes inextricably linked to our work and what we provide. We find meaning in our contributions, whether it's the salary we earn, the titles we hold, or the duties we fulfill. When these things are threatened, it is easy to feel as though we no longer matter. In Gregor's case, he loses not just his job, but the very foundation of his identity. Kafka portrays this transformation not as something fantastical, but as something deeply rooted in the reality of human existence. The story forces us to reckon with the consequences of living in a world where value is assigned based on productivity. It is worth noting that Kafka's works don't simply criticize external societal pressures. They also examine how individuals internalize these expectations. This self-erasure is the core of Gregor's tragedy. identity. He does not just lose his job, he loses his humanity. Moving beyond the work and entity trap, reclaiming our self-worth requires an active, deliberate effort to resist the forces that seek to define us. Kafka's critique extends beyond just the individual. He also points to a societal problem, one in which we are all complicit. The lesson here is not about abandoning work or productivity altogether. The struggle for meaning and authenticity. Kafka's works call us to rediscover a sense of authenticity in a world that demands conformity. Kafka's answer is not found in external achievements, but in the act of living authentically, of being true to oneself, even when the world around us seems to reject or misunderstand us. In this second part, we have explored the existential dimensions of Kafka's work. As it grapples with the pressures of modern life and the loss of self-worth in the face of societal expectations, embracing authenticity in a world of alienation in the first two parts, we've seen how Kafka's works, particularly the Metamorphosis, provide a profound critique of the way modern life pressures individuals to define their worth through external achievements. The story of Gregor Samsa's tragic transformation into an insect serves as an allegory for the way people often lose themselves in their roles. How the weight of societal expectations can strip away the essence of who we truly are. But Kafka doesn't leave us in despair. His works offer a roadmap for reclaiming our humanity and navigating the complexities of modern life in a way that preserves our authenticity. The importance of authenticity in a world that constantly tells us who to be and how to act. How can we reclaim the truth of who we are? The first step is to acknowledge that our value is not determined by our work or productivity. Gregor spends his life trying to meet the needs of his family, not just out of love. His family's reaction to him after his transformation initially shocked then disgusted. People-pleasing is rooted in fear, the fear of rejection, the fear of not being loved, and the fear of being alone. But when we base our identity on pleasing others, we betray our true selves. We sacrifice authenticity in order to be accepted, and in doing so, we make ourselves vulnerable to emotional and psychological harm. Kafka does not suggest that we should avoid contributing to society or fulfilling our responsibilities. Instead, he invites us to ask the crucial question: what happens when we tie our entire identity to what we do, rather than to who we are? In Gregor's case, his identity was entirely absorbed by his role as a provider. And when he could no longer fulfill that role, he became nothing more than an insect to be discarded. Kafka encourages us to recognize the importance of reconnecting with our deeper selves and finding value in who we are, beyond what we do. When Gregor transforms into an insect, his family members no longer treat him as a human being. Gregor's family abandons him, not out of malice, but because they no longer see him as capable of fulfilling his role. But Kafka calls us to a deeper awareness. True compassion involves recognizing the inherent worth of every person, not based on what they do for us or how they serve our needs, but simply because they are human. It requires us to stop measuring others by what they provide and start valuing them for who they truly are. It allows us to step away from the constant noise of external expectations, from the clamor of the world that tells us who we should be and what we should do. It provides a space to listen to our inner voice and reconnect with our true desires, values, and aspirations. Kafka's characters, particularly Gregor, are constantly caught in a web of obligations and expectations. They are unable to say no to the demands placed upon them, and as a result, they lose their sense of self. Boundaries, however, are not just about saying no to others. They're also about saying yes to ourselves. They are about carving out space for our true selves to exist, free from the influence of external forces. Kafka's works show us that solitude, far from being a form of suffering, can be a form of self-empowerment. It is in those quiet moments, away from the demands of others, that we can begin to rediscover our authentic selves. The same must be true for how we treat ourselves. They become indifferent, frustrated, and, in the case of his sister, even hostile. Kafka uses this shift to show how easily society, and even those closest to us, can stop seeing us as individuals when we no longer meet their expectations. Are we living according to our own values, or are we merely trying to meet the expectations of others? When we fail to establish boundaries, we risk losing touch with what truly matters to us. Kafka's characters, tragically, often fail to protect themselves from the world's dehumanizing forces. They internalize societal demands and sacrifice their own needs for the sake of others. True strength, Kafka suggests, lies in the ability to set healthy boundaries that protect our time, our energy, and our emotional well-being. The absence of compassion in Gregor's family is symbolic of a broader societal problem, the failure to recognize and honor the intrinsic value of the individual. Kafka shows us that the cost of this kind of self-sacrifice is the gradual erasure of who we truly are, and ultimately indifferent is a harsh reflection of the reality that those who rely on you for your ability to meet their needs are not always motivated by genuine care. Kafka encourages us to embrace self-compassion as a powerful antidote to the alienation we experience in modern life. This isn't about indulgence or excusing harmful behaviors. It's about accepting ourselves fully, flaws and all, and recognizing our worth without needing constant validation from the world around us. While Gregor is physically confined to his room, Kafka invites us to see this as more than a prison. It becomes a space for introspection and connection with the inner self. Solitude is often misunderstood as loneliness, but in Kafka's works, it serves as a space for self-discovery, reflection, and growth. In the Metamorphosis, Gregor's room, initially a place of isolation and neglect, becomes a metaphor for the internal space that we all need to cultivate in order to reconnect with who we truly are. The struggle for meaning is a central theme in Kafka's philosophy. His characters are often trapped in systems that seem to offer no purpose, no direction, and no sense of fulfillment. Yet, even in the midst of this existential crisis, there is a persistent search for meaning. The Metamorphosis offers no easy answers, no redemption for Gregor, but it does invite us to reflect on the deeper question of what makes life meaningful when everything else feels absurd. The people we try to please may not even appreciate the sacrifices we make for them. Kafka's characters, despite their tragic endings, embody a profound and difficult resilience. They continue to search for meaning, even in the face of overwhelming odds. This is the strength that Kafka asks us to adopt, to embrace the unknown, to live authentically, and to create meaning in a world that often offers none. Modern life, particularly under the pressures of capitalism, has created a world in which individuals are often seen as resources to be utilized. Kafka's critique is as relevant today as it was in his time, urging us to question how we define ourselves and how we can begin the work of reclaiming our humanity in a world that constantly measures us by our productivity. People are valued based on their economic output, their ability to consume and produce, rather than on their inherent worth as human beings. This creates a culture in which rest, introspection, and individuality are often undervalued. Kafka calls us to resist this dehumanizing cycle and reclaim what makes us human. When Gregor can no longer serve his purpose, he is cast aside, and his death is met with relief rather than sorrow. But because he believes that his value is determined by his ability to provide for them. Even when he is physically transformed into an insect, his first thoughts are not about his own well-being, but about how he will fulfill his role as a provider. This is a powerful metaphor for the way many of us live our lives, constantly striving to meet the expectations of others, afraid of disappointing those around us. It is not defined by what we can give to others, but by who we are in our entirety, our thoughts, our feelings, our passions, and our unique existence. Kafka encourages us to seek authenticity in the face of overwhelming societal pressure. Kafka's exploration of alienation is not just a commentary on external force. His works also examine how individuals are complicit in their own dehumanization. In a world that prioritizes productivity and conformity, it's easy to lose sight of who we are beneath the roles we play. Kafka's characters often struggle with the tension between the personas they project to the world and their inner truths. The Metamorphosis is not just about Gregor's external transformation, it is about the internal decay that comes when a person loses touch with their authentic self. The real tragedy of Gregor's transformation is not simply that he becomes an insect, but that he has been living as a creature of habit and duty long before that. He is trapped in a cycle of working, providing, and fulfilling expectations, never questioning the validity of his existence outside of these functions. Kafka uses Gregor to illustrate what happens when a person becomes so enmeshed in the demands of the world that they forget to ask themselves, who am I outside of the roles I play? This question is vital, not just for Gregor, but for all of us. The dangers of people-pleasing and external validation, one of the most dangerous traps. Kafka identifies as a tendency to live for others. Kafka shows us how destructive this can be. Gregor's life is devoted to people-pleasing, to fulfilling an obligation that is not rooted in authentic love or connection. Kafka's message here is clear. If you live your life solely for the approval of others, you will lose yourself. Breaking free from the chains of external expectations in order to reclaim our authentic selves, we must begin by recognizing and challenging the societal pressures that seek to define us. The lesson here is not about abandoning work or productivity altogether. The struggle for meaning and authenticity. Kafka's works call us to rediscover a sense of authenticity in a world that demands conformity. Kafka's answer is not found in external achievements, but in the act of living authentically, of being true to oneself, even when the world around us seems to reject or misunderstand us. In this second part, we have explored the existential dimensions of Kafka's work. As it grapples with the pressures of modern life and the loss of self-worth in the face of societal expectations, the role of compassion in rediscovering the self. One of the most powerful aspects of Kafka's critique of modern life is how it explores the lack of genuine compassion. Kafka's works challenge us to reconnect with the value of compassion not just toward others, but toward ourselves. By recognizing and nurturing our own humanity, we begin the process of reclaiming authenticity. The strength of solitude. Another powerful aspect of Kafka's philosophy is his treatment of solitude. Solitude, when embraced intentionally, can be a form of self-liberation. The need for boundaries in the face of societal pressure and the demand to conform. Setting boundaries becomes an essential practice for maintaining authenticity and inner peace. Kafka's work urges us to consider the boundaries we set in our own lives.